Gentleman's time has expired, and now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Carey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary.
Of course.
Given the mounting evidence about the origins of COVID-19 and that the People's Republic of China has been clearly involved in covering up, or in at the very least brazenly withholding information about the pandemic's beginning, does the President's budget provide for or allow for funding, particularly NIH grant funding or viral research for the People's Republic of China?
The President's budget includes no dollars for China to do viral research, has not and will not.
So you can guarantee that any HHS funding requested in the FY23 budget will not go either directly or indirectly to the People's Republic of China?
I can guarantee you that the federal government, this administration, and HHS, whether it's NIH or any other agency that might have granting authority, is not looking to give any money to the People's Republic of China.
Thank you. Your budget also proposes more than $750 million for health equity programs and climate research, among other things, while reducing funding for the rural hospital grants in my district and children's hospital graduate medical education. How does HHS justify prioritizing the progressive wish list of items over investments in rural health and children's hospitals?
Congressman, I'd love you to show me the numbers, because what I know is contrary to what you just said. We're actually making more investments in rural America when it comes to health care. We're actually increasing the number of health professionals that we'll be able to locate in rural facilities throughout the country. And so I'd be interested in seeing where you're getting this information, because it is, as far as I know, misinformation.
I'd be happy to have your staff work with my staff to get that information.
Look forward to that.
Lastly, I think there's a couple other things I would like to mention. The budget also mentions support for rural hospitals, as you have indicated, and providers, yet doesn't provide any substantial funding for rural health, is my numbers, so we'll work with you on that.
Please.
In fact, only $43 million above FY22, and in fact decreases the funding for the rural hospital flexibility grants by $5 million. By contrast, the same sub-agency, Health Resources and Service Administration, dedicates $5 million in new funding for grants to address and implement bias on healthcare providers. $1 million in new funding to the National Academy of Medicine to study biases recognition and clinical skills testing in certain medical schools, $20 million in new funding for diversity workforce, $25 million in new funding to diversity of the nurse workforce, and $10 million to support curricula developed in minority-serving institutions. How does HHS justify prioritizing millions more in radical bias training and workforce diversification than investments in rural health? And you're saying that it does, so I'd be happy to hear your answer on that, and I'd be happy to your team work with my team to get those answers.
First, thank you for letting me answer. Again, we don't have to necessarily agree, but I appreciate that you let me answer. One very important clarification, as I mentioned before to some other questions that were asked. The budget that we presented was based on what we saw coming forward under the continuing resolution, which you know is at a different funding level, much lower than the omnibus, which was the end result for the budget. Because we had to be fiscally responsible and base our 2023 projections on what we had from 2022, and those were based on the CR, we lowered all of our projections. That's why you might see some areas of funding that seem lower. We are absolutely prepared to work with you and others to make sure that we now that we know what the omnibus provided us, give you the true reflection of what we'd like to invest in those areas. But I will tell you that we are making major investments in rural America when it comes to healthcare. On the issue of equity and diversity, we're simply trying to do what I would hope you would want us to do. If you found that the federal government were letting out grants and resources to every place but your congressional district, you probably would be interested in finding out why. Well, there are many communities in America that are being left out all the time, whether it's in research trials where you don't find every American has a chance to participate, which skews the results of those research trials because we're only looking at a particular segment of America and hoping to apply that throughout the country. What I would say to you is, you've been gracious to let me answer. I'm more than willing to work with you to show you that not only do these programs work to provide every American with opportunity, but in rural America, we're making major investments.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr.